Hi, yeah, it's Jackie here with the LGFA, and we're on a call today. Normally, at a call, we'd be looking at club fixtures coming up over the weekend, but we are just over a week out from our current account.ie All-Ireland Club finals, and one of my guests, Gus Chapman, will be fourth official for the intermediate game at Croke Park on Saturday week. But we're focusing very much on referees today and injury prevalence in referees. And I've got three very, very special guests who are going to talk me through our topic, our overarching theme today. So I'm going to introduce them one by one. Top left-hand side of my screen as I look is Gus Chapman, leading inter-county referee. Bottom left-hand side of my screen is John Corrigan, who's a PhD researcher at Dublin City University. Have I got that right, John?
You have indeed, yeah.
Good stuff. And Lizzie Flynn from the LGFA as well is here. Lizzie, Head of Referee Development. Am I right in that one?
Yeah, match official, so all encompassing.
Perfect. Good to have you on, folks. How's all today? It's a wet and windy and wild day, so I hope you're all wrapped up well. Lizzie, you might talk us through, before we get underway, exactly what we're going to be covering in today's pod.
Yeah, well, today, I suppose, leading with the likes of John. John is a researcher, as he said. He's done brilliant work in the area of, I suppose, the prevalence of injuries in ladies football. So not just players, but he's actually looked at referees as well. I suppose maybe touch on where there are gaps, and also a little bit maybe on what we ourselves as an association, where we need to get to, but what we're doing at the moment to help support the referees that we do have that are coming into our system or making their way up through the system. So
brilliant, Lizzie. You've outlined it well, and you've sent some excellent briefing notes, which I can refer to throughout the conversation. So thanks for that. John, researcher, PhD researcher indeed at DCU. I have a number of topics here that Lizzie has outlined, as she's mentioned: the prevalence of injuries, the demands of the game, the factors that occur in injury, nutrition, hydration, etc., injury prevention, how important it is, and what next with your study. So where do you want to kick off, John, with all of that?
I suppose we can start with she could have sent me the same list, so you could have but I suppose we could start with probably the injury prevalence side of things and where we are at the moment. Well, currently, I suppose we always say about 1 in 2 referees gets injured each year within Gaelic games, or picks up some kind of injury. And within the ladies' game specifically, it's about 43%. And 80% of those injuries are going to be in the lower limb. So we're talking muscles of the thigh, muscles of the calf, and maybe around the knee as well. And 55% of those are your muscle tears, your cramp, spasm, muscle issues, basically. And then probably another 10% are going to be cartilage issues, probably at the knee, so meniscus. Another 10% on top of that are going to be your tendon, so your Achilles tendon, and another 10% on that are going to be your ligament issues as well. And most of those injuries are coming, Jackie, during running or high-speed sprinting or changes of direction. And okay, the biggest, I suppose, issue that we see is with those injuries. Yes, obviously those injuries are horrible, but they're taking referees out for a month at a time. And you know, if you think of a referee that's doing maybe anywhere between 3 and 8 games a week, say, whatever it is, you know, that's an awful lot of games to be affected by one referee missing. And the knock-on effect of that then as well is, you know, if that referee's gone missing, those games are going to a different referee. And is that other referee going to be able to take on that extra 3 games a week or whatever it is, you know, or is that putting that referee at further injury risk? Would be our concern, I suppose.
Okay. Well, you've outlined it well, and it's a nice segue into Gus. I mean, Gus, you do an awful lot of training, which is obviously specific to match day. Have you suffered much with injury? Because we hear a lot of, obviously, about players getting injured and have been out long term, and it's more, let's call it high profile news when it occurs. But referees get injured as well. It stands to reason. You're in a high intensity environment in your own right.
Yes, yeah. Unfortunately, there a couple of years ago, I was out for a year actually with an injury. I went over my ankle just in a football field. A little divot in the field, just went over on it. Unfortunately, it cost me a whole year of refereeing actually. But as you were saying, like if you're not warmed up and all ready for a match, you're very likely to pull injury. And especially like if you look outside the weather today, people are not going to get out and train. In Connacht, luckily enough, with Isha Hannon there, we have a winter training hub every Wednesday night there for 12 weeks, where we go up into the dome and train for 2 hours, which is absolutely super, you know. Like, so I feel that there, that training, even that training just once a week is massive, you know, like, but you still have to get out and do your own bit. Because if you didn't do anything for 2 or 3 days and then you went into a high intensity game, you're definitely going to pull something. You'll feel a twinge somewhere in the legs, somewhere you will definitely pull something, you know.
So, Gus, what type of training are you doing? Because I remember I wrote a book on a referee many years ago. Actually, Paddy Russell down here in Tipperary, you may have been aware,
yes, yeah.
leading intercounty referee, Gus, and he was talking about, you know, going for the, you know, maybe 6 mile runs a few times a week. But that's not massively game specific, Gus. So I presume you need to mix up what you're doing with a lot of sharp stuff as well.
Yes, we were lucky enough there from the Ladies Association. David came down to the Dome to us there a few weeks ago, and he actually set up a winter training program for us that we have to follow. So, like, it was, instead of just going out for, like you're saying, for 5 or 6 mile runs, where we done a warm up, he set up sprints, and one of the best ideas I've seen coming out of it, and it's just something simple, was like, we used to do a lot of sprints out to the 45 and turn and sprint back in. But instead of sprinting a straight line, he brought in curves. And it was just a simple thing, cones on a curve. So now you're sprinting around to the 45 on a curve, which you're actually putting in 50 to 55 meters of a sprint. You don't realize you're actually putting in an extra 10 meters sprint. But I found that very helpful. So you weren't going a straight line. Like in a game, you're not going a straight line, you're going a curve. He brought in Z runs where you sprint down and you come back in a Z in a field, like you sprint down to 45, you come back to the other corner, Z runs. I found them Z sprints very good as well, because you're changing direction the whole time instead of just doing straight line sprints, you know. Like, we were very lucky with David, and I found that very helpful, actually. I feel like the training I was saying was something like what Paddy Russell was, doing runs, going out for 5K, 10K runs, doing a few sprints in the fields and stuff like that. But I found the Z runs and the curve runs very beneficial. And I feel it helps the legs an awful lot, actually.
John, you're nodding knowingly there. I guess, you know, that doing those curve runs, doing those Z runs, you're using different muscles. It's not straight line running. It's hugely beneficial, I would imagine, for referees.
Yeah, 100%. It's just, I don't know the reason I laugh, and it's just, it's very, very similar to stuff I was talking about on the webinar a few weeks ago. But yeah, when we talk about, I suppose, what a referee needs to look like, and we often describe it as the referee fitness puzzle. And within that, you know, as you said, the 6 mile runs and that kind of thing are, you know, we say when we look at intercounty referees, they're doing 9-10 kilometers a game, say. With 10% of that sprinting. So there has to be at least, you know, 10% of your focus should be on that sprinting as well. But then when we look at the change of direction and those Z runs and stuff like that, you know, in a game, they're doing 400 or 500 different changes of direction. So, you know, if you think about, and I mentioned before, that's one of our big maybe issues when it comes to injury are happening in those changes of direction. And about 20% of those injuries are probably coming in a change of direction incident. So you need to, first of all, be practicing that from a technique perspective to get used to, you know, those different turns. Mainly because that is what you're actually doing in a game. You're not running in straight lines back and forth all day. You know, you're constantly turning left and right. And it's not just a case of, you know, when we would have looked at before, the things like the yo-yo or beat test when you're just running straight across and you're running straight back. You know, that's not what you're doing in a game either. Sure, it has a turn in it, but like the turns you're doing most of the time, Gus, are not straight back and forth. They're slight turns to the left, slight turns to the right, 30, 40 degrees, things like that. So that's really, you know, great from a training perspective. That is a big focus that, from my perspective anyway. And it's great that is what you're doing down in Connacht. But
John,
yeah,
sorry for interrupting you there. Are you very conscious then, and Gus, I'll throw this one to you as well. Like I'd imagine, like I run a bit myself, and acceleration and deceleration. Is there a lot of risk in that, John, if you're not fully conditioned or properly conditioned, because you're taking off very quickly and then you're trying to decelerate very quickly as well at times? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, generally from a hamstring injury perspective, that would be a big risk, particularly top speed running and going to acceleration. We're talking about hamstring injuries a lot. But are you talking about specifically in terms of the testing perspective? Or, I mean, you know, like doing your
is that something that a referee should incorporate into his or her training on the acceleration
side?
Piece?
Yeah, no, I would say it is. I would agree with you. I definitely think it is. But in terms of actually how you go about doing that, I do think you're staying very closely to things like your Z runs or your, you know, maybe going for 20 meters, then cutting to the left, running for 20 meters to the left, cutting then 20 meters to the right, stuff like that, where you're doing short bursts worked in within your you know, your longer endurance type running, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And Lizzie, Gus has obviously touched on it there, but there are the training hubs for both national and provincial referees which are happening. You might tell us a little bit more about those.
Yeah, I suppose based even on the research that John and his colleagues have done, there was a real need. I mean, we've done a little bit in the past, but I suppose having David there, we really kind of wanted to have something that we could offer to our national provincial referees that was the same across the board. So what we did do, because David has a huge expertise in that area, is to utilise his knowledge. So we would have opened it up to any referee who wanted to learn about it, to maybe given a programme. So we did an info session night online with them. And then David went out to each of the provinces to meet them in person, to go through what it would look like. But then on top of that, I suppose, because we're leading into the period of obviously into the winter, and they're all facing provincial or national fitness tests kind of in January, early to mid-January. So with that in mind, he looked at not just a general programme, but any referee who bought into this went back with a personal programme. So that took into account that, like, we think, okay, they're finished, but there are some referees out there that, for example, that could be doing 2 games on a Thursday, 2 school games, or maybe when the club was still happening, they're doing maybe 1 or 2 club games at the weekend, and games and colleges games in the evenings and things like that. So I suppose it was tailored to maybe what suited the referees. And kind of as what Gus said within Connacht, it was provided to each province. So, like, obviously Gus' own experiences, you know, Connacht themselves are very supportive and opened up the dome, and it's available to them if they want to meet up weekly, which they've bought into. So collectively as a group, and I know myself and Gus were actually talking about this last week, even referees can often go out and train their own, Jackie, and that's very difficult, and players and team management are together as a group. So even mentally, you know, you get injured, it can be it can be a lonely place. So even coming together, training together, even if it's only once a week or once every 2 weeks, I think is having a benefit to the group of referees that do that. I don't know, maybe if Gus wants to come in on that, but I think we were chatting about how positive that experience has been for you, and I know some of the other referees within your own province.
Massively so, Lizzie, and even for anybody that's exercising, having a buddy, you know, the buddy system is crucial. Lizzie, you refer to David. Is David Lernahan?
Yeah, David Lernahan. So David joined us there in recent months, and he is the National Development Officer with the remit.
Yeah, and he's highly qualified. I actually have his LinkedIn profile up here. You know, he says himself he's fascinated by the field of sports science and athlete development, and he's an MSc in sports performance. So he knows what he's talking about, which is obviously very, very beneficial then for you, Gus, and your fellow referees and officials.
Yeah, look, I'm probably old school, you know.
How do I know you're going to say that?
But like, I would have been the type that would have went out for me runs, you know. Like, I wouldn't have been into the sprinting, I wouldn't have been into the science part of it, I wouldn't have been into these curve runs, I wouldn't have been into these Z runs. When I met David online, I was interested. I personally didn't have any sort of get up and go to follow his program. But when we went up to the dome and he met us, he talked very well. And when he went through it with us, I can't believe myself that I've changed my style of training. I really can't, you know, like, and I found like this just such a simple thing, like the curved runs. Like, it's so simple. I can't understand how I've never thought of it myself. I found that very, very beneficial. The Z runs, Very, very good. And with David, like David there, you get an email off him once a week or every 2 weeks checking up on you. How are you getting on with your program? Or he's his number there. You can give him a buzz morning, noon, or night to say, look, this is not working. Can you change this? Or I have a niggle here, or can you change this? Like even down the first night in the Dome, there's a few of the referees there that had little niggles or stuff like this, and he was showing them the proper way to stretch it out and stuff like that. And especially as winter training hubs, like if you went out tonight, spilling rain, next one you feel a bit of a stitch or you feel a little bit tired, you're going to cut down. You're not going to do it at the 100%. But in the Dome, you're there, as you said, with your buddies, and they're actually pushing you on, because somebody comes up beside you, he thinks, well, I'm going to be as good as him, and you're thinking, feck, well, I want to be as good as him. So the training hubs are massive. They're absolutely brilliant. They're a great thing, because you're getting 2 hours of training there on a Wednesday night that, as you said, you could be watching Liverpool there on the telly or something like this, and a beer in the fridge. You're saying, well, I'm going to watch the match, get a beer, and there's your training gone. But when you're meeting up there, everyone goes, and we're all pushing one another for the hour. A bit of crack and all at the beginning, and then everyone gets into it. Everyone's pushing one another. They're hugely beneficial to the referees.
Brilliant, Gus. Now, you've talked about the types of training you're doing, which is fantastic stuff. You mentioned, obviously, you missed a year. So how did you overcome that injury, Gus, and rehab yourself to a place where you felt comfortable that you wouldn't suffer a recurrence?
I tell you, it was very hard, but it's a strange way. But when you were looking at the appointments coming out, and you seen a referee down for an appointment that was close to you, were saying, Jesus, that could have been my game. So that was my get up and go. That was me. I could have easily said, look, I've refereed at the top level. I've had everything. I've seen everything. Maybe it's time to retire. But when I seen referees going into games that I thought I should have got, or I should have had, or I would have been able to do, or you'd be saying, maybe I could have done better, or, you know, so that was a great get up and go for me. You know, like that's how I kept going and rehab, got the physio, got the training, followed the programs, and got myself back to full fitness again.
So there's a real competitive spirit within the group, as well as being good friends.
Oh, there is. Yes.
Yeah, you drive each other on, which is great.
John,
That's
it,
Jackie,
John, you're waiting to come in there. Go on.
Yeah. Sorry, no, it's first of all, it's amazing hearing Gus talk about that, just because it feels like a lot of my research is coming into fruition almost, in a sense. I don't want to take credit for it, and I'm sure David is doing fantastic work, and so I'm not taking credit for that at all. But just even hearing the different things he's saying, I'm going, oh yeah, I've heard people say that before, and it's great to see that it's actually now happening with those training hubs and different things, and people calling for, like I've from interviews I've done, people saying, oh, I wish that somebody would just, you know, send me an email once a week or every couple of weeks just to check in and make sure that I'm sticking to the plan. All those things is amazing. But such a, you know, from the interviews that I've done, motivation is such a huge part of it. Particularly, you know, well, people tend to be negative, but particularly the lack of motivation. So that's where, you know, things like those training hubs coming in, and you get that competitive element, and you're not isolated, because that's a big part of it as well. You know, it's very much a solo driven, you know, vocation. So if they're not isolated, they're in that group atmosphere, you know, they're gonna pick up what the group is doing, and they're gonna actually stick to it. And so it's amazing to hear what Gus is saying, really. It's
a complex thing, all right, John. The appliance of science is what you've brought to the table here, I have to say. So well done on that.
And Jackie, to be fair to John, while David might be doing some of the work with the provincial and national referees, it has come, and how we have decided to go about this is based on kind of his research. And I suppose the one piece that's probably that'll be interesting for us, and John might want to talk about, is for his research, what next? You know, so we're kind of talking here with Gus about, at the moment, we can provide this support for our provincial and national referees, but for somebody maybe starting out refereeing, or who is within their club or within their county. So I suppose, you know, it's what's next with that, you know, and maybe where that might take us as well as an association. Would be interesting. So I don't know if John wants to even touch on that, but
yeah, it's a good point you make, Lizzie, because everything that we're doing now and that's been applied to the referees is evidence-based, John, which is crucial for them to buy into it at the same time. I mean, you're not coming with pie in the sky stuff, you're coming with real hard, solid research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I suppose I've touched on it already, but what we're talking about here is this year and last year, we did about 500 minutes of interviews with referees of all ages, different levels, from your club referee to your national level referee, all around the country, men and women, to get an idea of, okay, first of all, what's realistic to actually take on, and what are the different things that they're facing from a barrier perspective, and what different things could actually help them to pick this up. And training hubs was one of them. So I'm very glad to see those coming into fruition. But we then talked about, okay, if we were to go and develop a program or something that you can go and do, what should that look like? And it's very difficult, obviously, because there's massive variety, from one level of the referee spectrum to the other. There's massive variety. Some need to be doing more, some need to be doing less. So in actually developing, our plan is anyway, going into the future, because that's what you want me to say, is we're aiming to develop this new plan, basically. And it has to be convenient, it has to be compact, because time, above all else, time is the thing that's in, I suppose, the people just don't have. So it has to be compact, and we're aiming maybe at around, even, from a warm-up perspective, about 10 minutes. We don't want it to be equipment driven, because, that's going to lead to other issues with resources and stuff like that. So it's going to be very basic, very convenient, very compact, but also, more importantly, it's going to be effective. And it has to be specific to the referee context. It's going to have stuff like your Z runs, your curved runs. But I feel like, and maybe I don't want to say this, but we've almost gotten too much of a focus on the running side of things. And from the research I've looked at, I'm going all over shop here a little bit, but from the research I've looked at, there is a disproportionate focus on things like running and stretching, particularly mobility work, within a referee population from the research I've looked at. And the strength work that is crucial from an injury prevention perspective, it rarely actually gets done. And those kind of things, and I don't want to say this either, but I will anyway, it comes potentially from an over focus around passing a test, as opposed to actually getting yourself to a high performance level, or a state where you're not at risk of getting injured, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what we actually need to do is a case of getting that program to a level where everyone wants to actually do it. It has to hit on all the different elements. So it's great from pre-season, off-season perspective. Look, that's when they have the most time. So you have to really focus on when the time is there, because time is difficult to come by. So that's when we're focusing on trying to get the running done, trying to get some kind of strength, mobility stuff done. And then during the season, also touching on, bits of warm up, bits of cool down, and making sure it actually gets done on a consistent basis, because, it's great to produce different things, but actually getting them to be done, consistently, that's where you're going to, find the most change. And, when there's programs out there and they're not specific enough to the LGFA referee at the moment, but, they're showing in soccer that if you're doing these programs for a consistent period of time, you're going to have 60% less injuries. So, we need to develop something like that that's going to fit in for your LGFA referee.
And talk to me a little bit then, John, about the nutrition and hydration piece, because any one of us could go to the gym and lift some weights and do some cardio on the bike or whatever, and you might come home then and eat a pizza. So it's a guilty as charged, Your Honor. But all jokes aside, John, nutrition and hydration is vital in the holistic approach to preparation.
Yeah, of course. And like, it comes down to as simple as, you need to drink something before a game, you need to drink something during the game, you need to drink something after the game. With all of these things, I'm trying to be as realistic as possible, because you can give people, within elite sport, they do like, they weigh you before, they weigh you after, and see how much water you've lost through sweat, and that's the exact amount, you return to the person. That isn't realistic in a referee context. So, I'm not trying to be too strict on people either. Everything has to be realistic. So it is a case of just, finding a balance, because as well as, Jackie, you're not a criminal for having a pizza of a Wednesday night either. Do you know what I mean? So
normally
I'm not trying to be too hard. I'm not trying to be too hard on people at the same time. I do want them to understand during the off season, they should take a rest for a week, and do absolutely nothing and have a pizza, whatever it is. Have several pizzas if they want. So it is a case of balance, but there has to be, some level of understanding of, this isn't all the time. You have to have some level of of a clean carb, protein, and your water before, after game, stuff like that. I'm not going to get too much into the specifics of it, and we'll
Yeah,
go
okay.
through, and there will be education, and the education around will be, of course, on the program and what we plan to bring from a program perspective, but it'll hit on your general health aspects as well of nutrition and hydration, and sleep as well, another massive part of from a recovery perspective.
Absolutely, for the recovery piece. John, you talk about so we'll have an occasional pizza party from time to time, but in terms of what you should drink before, during, and after a game, I think that's an important one. So you're obviously looking to hydrate pre-game, stay hydrated during the game, and rehydrate after the game. So what do you recommend?
This might be controversial, but I've always think water. You can't go wrong. Okay. You can't go wrong. I
was going to say, is it just water, or do you do something electrolyte based, or
there's well, from the research I've looked at on, and people are they can disagree with me on this, and that's fine. But from the research I've looked at, unless you're doing Ironman stuff, the chances are, if you have a balanced diet, generally speaking, water from start to finish, it will be fine from a game perspective. Now, if you're doing, some people might be doing crazy numbers of games, maybe they need some kind of electrolyte balance situation. But generally speaking, water is sufficient. Yeah.
What about a pre-match meal? And how long before? So 2 hours, 2.5 hours?
Yeah, see, it's going to be very, some people are better responders than others. I would say anywhere between, you could say 2 hours. But again, Jackie, you have to understand, some people are going straight from work straight to a game.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm not trying to be
as Gus referred to, John, it's time. Yeah.
So, if they can have something, even a small, how do I say, even a small basic carbohydrate beforehand. So nothing too serious. It doesn't have to necessarily be a massive meal, but if they're, whatever they do, not going there on an empty stomach, put it that way. They have to have some kind of fueling from a carbohydrate perspective pre-game. And whether that's, if it has to be half an hour before, it has to be half an hour before. Do you know what I mean? Ideally, we're talking 90 minutes, 2 hours, as you say. But if it has to be, they'd be better off consuming something than consuming nothing.
Okay. But Gus, what are you taking from John there in terms of what you would do yourself?
Yeah, I'd always have a banana or two in the bag, and if I was feeling a bit peckish, I'd always eat a banana 10 or 15 minutes before a game. But in a general rule, I would never eat an hour before a game, all I drink is water. And I'm sort of glad you brought it up there, Jackie, about as you're saying, the electrics, the amino acids and all. I see a lot of referees, it wouldn't be national now, but a lot of club referees that have a can of Red Bull or a can of Monster before to go out onto the field, or to be mixing up this powder stuff and drinking it, and I'm glad you brought it up, because I was always wondering myself, is it doing you more harm than good, or is it giving you a false energy for half an hour for a match, or what's your opinion on it?
Go on, John, you can take that one.
I can, of course. Yeah, well, obviously they're doing that from a caffeine perspective. Yeah. And that probably comes back to the whole, as I was saying before, about they're doing so much, they're going straight from work to into the game, or whatever the case may be. So they need that extra little kick. And look, at the end of the day, caffeine is a stimulant, and it does work. I'm not going to say that it doesn't work. Whatever they're taking probably does benefit them. But it's just masking. It's not giving them energy, so to speak. It's just masking their ability to determine that they're tired, if that makes sense. But look, athletes take caffeine before games as well, and referees are athletes as well. So I'm not going to stop people from indulging in now. There's finer versions of caffeine than maybe your can of Red Bull, but at the end of the day, I don't have anything against it, Gus. That might surprise you. Yeah.
But is there what I'd be worried about is that long-term damage, or would you become addicted to it? Like if you took, I see boys with what's this thing, grenade, these grenades, taking 2 grenade tablets before a match with water, and they're saying, geez, these are the best things since sliced bread, and it's the sort of thing, if you went out, you could be as fit as a fiddle, you go out to the match, you do a warm-up for 10 minutes, next thing you just feel your legs are tired, your body, you just need that boost. If you took one of them grenades and next thing you went out, you were flying it. Next thing you're taking them every match. Is there a thing done for long-term damage on it, or?
I wouldn't say
it's a good question, John,
Anyway.
because it's feeding back into the overall theme of injury prevention. Like, our supplements or energy drinks or stimulants or boosters, do they come with an enhanced injury risk in any shape or form?
So I wouldn't. That's a difficult one to answer, Jackie. What I would say is, mainly from Gus's perspective, there, he's talking about a dependence, and you definitely can get a dependence. You know, and you'll notice even, you know, if you haven't had your coffee before 11 o'clock, say, you can have that kind of dependence as well. But you know, I mean, and it's more, I actually would say it's more a case of, say you don't have your grenade, or whatever. I don't even know what grenade is, but you say you know, you've gotten to this point where before every game you have to have this, you know, whatever it is, drink or whatever, for you to be able to perform essentially. And then, you know, geez, you run out and you have to go to this game and you don't have your magic supplement. Then you're in a real sticky
it becomes
situation.
a mental thing then as well, doesn't it?
100%. Yeah.
It's almost like a superstition. I have to have this, or
yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure it does benefit them as well. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it's more that the actual knock-on effect from a physical perspective as well. You know, if you don't have that caffeine that you're used to having, your brain isn't going to be too happy with you. You're going to have things like migraine, and you're realistically going to have reduced performance. And, you know, whether that's going to whether the knock-on effect of that is going to be injury is going to be difficult for me to estimate. But I would say if it's performing, it is leading to an increased performance. It is increasing reducing your tiredness. So, you know, whether on the other side of things, does that put you in a position where maybe you're more likely to get injured because you're not fully aware of how tired you are, that kind of thing? It's difficult to say, because I'm not aware of research in that area at the moment anyway. But I definitely think, look, I'm not trying to say, once again, I don't want to criminalize anybody. Caffeine, you know, is perfectly fine to have your cup of coffee. Now, taking 2 tablets of whatever, that's a different story. And I'm sure they're going by the recommended dosage and all this. But you don't want to be too dependent on these things. But, you know, a cup of coffee isn't the end of the world either.
Okay. But John, I suppose even on that kind of guidance, like we spoke about, maybe at times injuries are happening for lots of reasons. And for referees, I'd imagine a lot of it is, like most injuries, because it's overuse. And like, we know we talk about wanting more referees and how important they are to our game. And like, you know, is there habits building in there, you know, because, you know, they're going from one game to another, you know, or they're doing a couple of games or a couple of days in a row where they've games. So that's probably feeding into that whole thing. So of kind of what we're talking about. And like, you know, I know
trying to stay going, Lizzie, more or less, you know, just trying to stay going. Yeah.
Like referees don't want, you know, as I said kind of at the start, like referees are people too, and they don't want to let people down. So if they're asked to a game or someone else is now not available for whatever reason, you know, if they say no, there's probably guilt. So someone is kind of carrying going, I'm actually really tired of referee 3 days in a row here now, and I'm being asked to do this and I don't want to let them down. But it's maybe going after that, you know, is there a time where they should be saying no, and they're just going and, you know, they may be completely empty in the tank. And we, I suppose, people who are supporters maybe don't see game, maybe on Sunday that referee might have refereed a game on school's game on a Thursday, maybe another club game on a Friday, a club game on a Saturday, and here they are, another game on a Sunday. And that's a huge amount, you know, whereas maybe as players or managers, we might be meeting with our players, or we might be training 2 or 3 times in the week with our club. But geez, that referee might have actually had a couple of really tough games coming into the weekend. So it's just kind of people being aware, Jackie, that, you know, I keep saying it, but referees are people too, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was
just
actually
to wrap it up, guys. We've touched on it, John. What's coming next, or how do you see this evolving?
Yeah, so the plan really for the next year, and I don't want to put a too strict a calendar on it, but that's the plan anyways, over the next year, that we'll finalize the development of this program that we're working on at the moment. And that's probably very similar to, I suppose, stuff that David's doing already, but finalize the program, and that'll have your warm-up, your cool down, your pre-season, off-season plan, and then go with that. There'll be a sort of educational workshop as well around injury prevention, around there'll be elements of general health as well, as I said, and that'll be that'll have to be practical. You know, as Gus said, actually, you know, he wasn't too excited about it until he got there and he got into the dome, as I said, and he heard David speak about it, and David brought him through it, and that's when he bought into it. So it really, and that was a huge thing that came from the interviews that I was doing, was this has to be practical. It has to be in person. I have to see somebody actually do this and you know, tell me about it before I'm actually going to go and want to do this myself. So, you know, it has to be practical. It has to be in person, and it led by people like David and myself, and integrated into something that already exists. Ideally, you know, you don't want to be pulling people out at all times of the year to go and do different things. If, you know, again, comes back to time, but it has to ideally be integrated into something that already exists and be relatively compact and near to them and all this stuff, so they'll actually go and do it. But that's what's coming in the next year. And we hope to do a new kind of, I suppose, series of education around injury prevention, and then the final program itself for referees that'll, you know, be checked up on a regular basis, as David is already doing as well.
Well, sounds good. Sounds good, Gus.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, good. So I suppose some of the key takeaways from today, Lizzie, I'll let you wrap it up. Number one, stay away from the grenades anyway, but
and the people.
I'm not sure what they are either.
Lizzie, have we covered off pretty much everything that we wanted to talk about today?
I think we have, yeah. I was just kind of dipping into a little piece of John's research.
You could talk all day about this, really, couldn't you?
You could, yeah. And just even get the human perspective, even from what's expected. And I've obviously, I know Gus is a national referee, but, you know, even for anyone who's going to watch this to kind of go, wow, I didn't really realize that our referees are actually, this is what they're doing, but maybe at this stage what a national referee is expected to do. But even to kind of, even if there's people that watch a Jackie that maybe are not, you know, a provincial national referee, to kind of go, actually, I never thought about buddying up with somebody. If there's only, maybe not even every week, but say, listen, we meet up once a month even initially. Yeah. So you're work away on your own, so that you have a group of people to, you know, so like when somebody does get injured, you know, it can be a lonely place, but actually if you've trained with a group of people, it's much easier to be part of that. So yeah, for me, just that's where I leave it on you, Jackie, if you want to finish the wrap up.
Super. No, brilliant. Great hearing from you all. So thanks to Gus Chapman, leading inter-county referee, and best wishes, Gus, and good to hear that you're fitting well at the moment. John Corrigan, PhD researcher in DCU, and Lizzie Flynn, head of match official development with the LGFA. Folks, really enjoyed it. Thanks a million for coming on today.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.